The world of Valen hung silent under its pale silver sky. Sharp mountains rose like glass towers and the air shimmered with cold light. The Valens were known across the stars for their perfect order and emotionless pride. They believed themselves the most advanced race in the galaxy. Every child was born through a flawless process of genetic selection. Every mind was trained to serve the Empire. But among them was one who had been born imperfect. Her name was Rena. Rena was the princess of Velun, the only daughter of Emperor Terran. She was tall and graceful, her silver skin smooth like crystal, and her eyes bright with violet light. She looked like every other Valen, yet inside her body was a flaw the Empire could not forgive. Rena was barren. No science, no medicine, and no machine could change it. She could never give birth to a child. On Velun, that meant she had no worth. From her youth, Rena lived under the shadow of whispers. The noble houses spoke of her as a failure. The royal scientists avoided her. The priests of the Order of Perfection said her existence was a lesson against weakness. Even her father, the Emperor, rarely spoke to her. He treated her with cold politeness, never anger but never love. In her heart, Rena carried a quiet sadness, but she hid it well. Veluns did not cry. Veluns did not feel. Then came the time when the Empire faced its first defeat in many centuries. The humans of Earth had built an alliance that challenged Velun expansion. The war between the two sides had burned through 7 systems before both finally agreed to a fragile peace. The Valen Council decided that a marriage alliance would seal the treaty. They chose Rena, not because she was beloved, but because giving her away would cost them nothing. To them, she was a symbol of their generosity and an insult to humans at the same time. On the day of the treaty, Rena stood in the Hall of Stars. The hall was vast, with shining pillars made of living light. Velen nobles filled the chamber, all watching her in silence. At the far end stood the human delegation. Among them was Commander Mason, leader of Earth's exploration fleet. He was a simple man compared to the shining figures of Velun. His skin was brown from sunlight, his hair dark, and his uniform plain. Yet his eyes held a calm strength that seemed out of place in that cold hall. When the Emperor announced the union, a faint murmur spread among the nobles. Many smiled in secret amusement. They thought it was a clever insult, giving their barren princess to a human who could never bring heirs of value. Mason, however, did not react with anger. He bowed his head with respect and said only, "I accept the alliance with honor." Rena looked at him then, searching for mockery, but found none. His voice was steady, his tone gentle. For the first time, someone looked at her not as a failure, but as a person. Something stirred deep inside her, a feeling she could not name. After the ceremony, Rena was escorted to the human ship Horizon. The sleek silver vessel hummed softly as it prepared to leave Velun orbit. Rena stood at the viewing deck, watching her homeworld fade into the distance. She felt no joy, but neither did she feel sorrow. She only felt free, as if a long-closed door had quietly opened. The humans treated her with surprising kindness. Mason introduced her to his crew, who bowed politely but not fearfully. They called her Princess, but there was warmth in their voices. She had never heard warmth before. The humans smiled often, laughed loudly, and shared stories even while they worked. It confused her at first. On Velun, emotion was weakness. Here it seemed to be life itself. During her first meal aboard the Horizon, she sat at the same table as the crew. They passed her dishes filled with colors she had never seen. Mason noticed her hesitation and said, "Try it. It is sweet." She took a small bite and felt a strange taste spread through her senses. It was pleasant. When the humans saw her slight surprise, they laughed kindly. For a moment, Rena almost smiled. Days turned into weeks. Rena spent her time learning about the ship, its systems, and human technology. She was amazed at how humans built things with limited resources yet great imagination. Their machines were not perfect, but they worked because people trusted one another. On Valen, every part had to fit perfectly. On the Horizon, people helped parts that failed. It was a simple idea, but to Rena, it was profound. One evening, she walked into the observation deck. The stars stretched before her like a river of fire. Mason stood there quietly, gazing at the endless night. She approached him and said, "You are not afraid to travel so far from your world?" Mason smiled and replied, "Humans have always been travelers. We find our way by trying." Rena thought about those words for a long time. The Velens never tried. They only acted when certain of success. Humans risked failure and learned from it. Perhaps that was their true strength. A few days later, disaster struck. A plasma storm erupted without warning in a nearby sector. The horizon was caught in the edge of its wave. The energy shields began to flicker, and the engines strained under the pressure. Rena stood beside Mason on the bridge as alarms filled the air. Crew members shouted updates, their faces tense but determined. Mason ordered, "Divert all power to the forward shield. Prepare to ride it out." Rena studied the readings. She saw the flaw in the energy balance and knew what had to be done. Without hesitation, she ran to the engineering bay and began to adjust the plasma stabilizers manually. The radiation was high, but she worked quickly. Sparks flew around her, but she did not stop until the readings turned steady. When the storm finally passed, the horizon floated safely in the calm after the chaos. Later, Mason found her sitting beside the control panel, her skin faintly glowing from the energy exposure. He said quietly, "You saved the ship." She looked at him and replied, "It was logical to act." Mason shook his head with a faint smile. "It was brave to act?" Rena looked down, uncertain how to answer. She had been praised before, but never like this. It felt different, warm, and alive. From that day forward, something changed in Rena. She began to spend more time among the crew, listening to their stories and laughter. She learned their names, their hopes, and their fears. They were not perfect beings, yet they cared deeply for one another. She started to understand that compassion could be strength, not weakness. One night she sat in her room looking at her reflection. The silver of her skin shimmered under the soft light. She thought of her people who had cast her aside and of this human ship where everyone had a place. She wondered what perfection truly meant. Maybe it was not the absence of flaw, but the courage to keep moving despite it. Mason visited her before the next mission began. "We are heading to the frontier," he told her. "It will be dangerous." Rena looked at him and said, "Then we will learn." Mason nodded with quiet respect. He had come to see her not as an alien gift, but as a true companion in their journey through the stars. As the horizon moved through space, Rena stood by the viewing window once again. She thought of Velun's cold palaces and the laughter of the human crew. She felt the soft hum of the ship under her feet and realized that, for the first time in her life, she was not afraid. The stars no longer looked distant. They looked like paths waiting to be followed. In her heart, she carried a new kind of fire. It was small, gentle, but growing. The Barren princess who had been mocked by her people was beginning to see that emptiness could be the beginning of creation. Her journey with humans had just begun, and though she did not know what awaited her, she was ready to find out. She turned toward the stars, her eyes bright with new purpose, while the horizon sailed onward into the endless night. The horizon moved through the quiet space between stars. Inside its metal walls, life carried a calm rhythm. The crew worked, laughed, and rested together. For Rena, each day among humans felt like walking through a dream she did not fully understand. On Velun, everything had order and distance. On this ship, people greeted her with smiles, spoke openly, and helped one another without command. It was strange to her, yet she felt drawn to it. Rena spent her mornings in the research bay studying human systems. She learned about their medicine, energy engines, and data records. Human science was not as perfect as Valen technology, but she saw something different in it. Humans built things with care, not only logic. They tried again and again until it worked. Failure did not shame them. It made them stronger. That spirit fascinated her. Mason often visited the research bay to check on her progress. He noticed how quickly she learned and how her quiet nature began to change. She still spoke little, but her voice carried more confidence now. One afternoon, as she worked on an energy converter, Mason stood beside her and said, "You learn faster than anyone I have ever met." Rena looked up and replied calmly, "Your systems are imperfect. That makes them easier to understand." Mason smiled. "Maybe imperfection is what makes us human." She looked at him puzzled but thoughtful. She did not know yet how true those words were. In the evenings, Rena joined the crew in the common room. They told stories of home, of families waiting on Earth, of oceans and forests that shone blue and green. She had never seen such things, but their words painted pictures in her mind. When she spoke, the crew listened with curiosity. She told them about Velen's crystal cities and floating towers, but her stories sounded cold even to her own ears. Human stories were full of feeling. Hers were full of silence. She began to wonder what it would be like to feel as they did. One day, the Horizon arrived at a damaged supply station orbiting a barren moon. The station had been hit by a meteor storm and several humans were trapped inside. Mason ordered a rescue mission. Rena insisted on joining. Mason hesitated. "It will be dangerous," he said. Rena replied, "Danger is a part of learning." Her calm tone made him nod. They took a small shuttle to the station. The air inside was filled with smoke and flickering lights. Rena moved with precision, using her knowledge of energy systems to restore partial power. When they reached the trapped workers, she helped carry the injured back to the shuttle. One young man was too weak to move. Rena placed her hands on his chest and used a small energy pulse from her suit to restart his breathing. The others stared in awe. Mason said softly, "You saved him." She only answered, "He needed to live." Back on the Horizon, the rescued crew thanked her again and again. Rena felt a strange warmth spread inside her chest. It was not pride. It was something softer, something she could not explain. She began to understand that humans valued life in ways Valens never did. To them, each person mattered. That idea changed her view of the universe. Weeks passed. The Horizon continued its mission to explore new sectors. Rena's room was now filled with human objects, books, small plants, and a glowing sphere that changed color with touch. She found peace in watching its light shift from blue to gold. It reminded her of how her life was changing slowly and quietly. One night, Mason called her to the observation deck. The stars shone bright and a large nebula glowed in red and violet. Mason said, "Beautiful, isn't it?" Rena looked at the swirling light and replied, "It is alive." He nodded. "That is what I always feel when I look at it." She turned to him and asked, "How can you feel that?" "It is only gas and dust." Mason smiled gently. "Maybe it is not what it is made of. Maybe it is what it makes us feel that matters." Rena stood in silence thinking about that for a long time. Valens saw beauty only in perfection. Humans saw it everywhere. The next mission brought them to a planet rich in minerals but unstable in atmosphere. The Horizon landed near a mountain range to collect samples. During the operation, an energy quake struck, shaking the ground. A piece of machinery toppled toward a human worker. Without thinking, Rena ran forward and pushed him away. The heavy frame struck her instead, knocking her down. Mason rushed to her side, shouting orders for medics. When Rena woke in the medical bay, she saw Mason sitting beside her. His eyes showed worry. She tried to move, but he stopped her gently. "You were lucky," he said. "You could have been badly hurt." She answered softly, "He would have died." Mason looked at her and said, "You did not hesitate. That is not the Valen way." She turned her head toward the ceiling and replied, "Maybe I'm not the same as before." He smiled at her words. "I hope not." After that day, the crew began to treat Rena as one of their own. She joined every mission and shared meals with them. Her laughter began to sound in the corridors. It was small and quiet at first, but it was real. For the first time in her life, she felt she belonged somewhere. Rena started teaching human scientists about Valen methods. Together, they created new ways to heal injuries using hybrid energy cells. The success of their work spread across human stations, and many lives were saved. Mason praised her openly in front of everyone. She felt shy but proud. She had never known the feeling of being valued for her actions rather than her title. One evening, she stood alone in the ship garden. The artificial soil held small green plants that smelled fresh. She touched one leaf and whispered, "So small, yet alive." Mason approached quietly and said, "They grow better when someone talks to them." She looked at him with surprise. "Plants do not understand words," he smiled. "Maybe they understand care." She thought about his words again. Humans gave life meaning through care. That was something her people never understood. Later, when the ship faced another problem, Rena's bond with the humans deepened even more. A strange signal appeared near their path, leading them toward a hidden asteroid base. When they explored it, they discovered an old Valen research lab that had been lost decades ago. Rena recognized the design at once. Inside were broken machines and data logs describing experiments on genetic perfection. She felt a chill as she read them. These were the same scientists who had declared her barren. Mason saw her pale expression and asked, "Are you all right?" She replied, "This place is a reminder of what I was." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You are not what they said you were." She looked at him and said quietly, On Velun, a flaw means failure. Among humans, a flaw becomes strength. I do not understand how that is possible. Mason answered, because we choose what to make of it. Those words stayed in her heart. They collected the data and left the base behind. That night, Rena could not sleep. She kept thinking of her past and her people's cold judgment. She wondered what would happen if they could see what she had become. The thought frightened her, yet a part of her wanted them to know that she was no longer their broken princess. Over the next months, the horizon continued deeper into space. Rena's friendship with Mason grew stronger. They shared long talks about their worlds, their beliefs, and the meaning of life. Mason admired her intelligence and courage. Rena admired his patience and kindness. She began to see him not just as a commander, but as someone who showed her what humanity truly meant. He treated everyone with respect, no matter their rank or origin. To him, people mattered more than systems. That idea had changed her completely. One quiet evening, Rena stood at the window of her room looking at the stars. She remembered her father's voice calling her a disappointment. She thought of the laughter of the human crew and the gentle warmth of Mason's smile. For the first time, she whispered to herself, "I am not broken." It was a simple sentence, but it felt like a new beginning. Outside, the horizon moved silently through the endless sky. Inside, Rena sat by her glowing sphere, watching its colors shift from blue to gold. The ship hummed softly around her. She closed her eyes and let the sound fill her. The Barren princess of Velun, once given away as an insult, was learning the human way, a way built on courage, compassion, and the will to live with heart. In that quiet moment, Rena understood something powerful. Perfection was not life. Life was growth. Life was change. Life was love in all its forms of care and connection. She smiled softly, feeling at peace, ready for whatever came next. The horizon moved steadily through deep space. Its engines glowed soft blue as it crossed the border of known worlds. Inside the ship, Rena's life had changed completely. She was no longer the silent guest from Velun. She was now a valued part of the crew. The humans trusted her, respected her, and looked to her for guidance in science and technology. For the first time, she felt proud of herself. Rena had found her place in the research bay. It had become her world. Machines hummed, screens glowed, and new ideas filled the air. She worked beside human scientists every day, studying energy healing, genetics, and hybrid biology. Her Velun mind gave her great precision, while her time among humans gave her creativity. Together, these traits created something new. She began to study how human cells could adapt to radiation, temperature, and even alien energy forms. Her curiosity had no limit. One morning, Mason visited the research bay. He watched her work with calm admiration. "You never stop," he said. Rena smiled faintly and replied, "There is too much to learn. Your kind is full of surprises." Mason laughed. "We try our best." Rena looked at him for a moment. She still found it strange that humans could laugh so easily, even in the middle of long, hard work. That simple joy gave her strength. Weeks turned into months. Rena's experiments started to show strange results. She noticed that when human cells were mixed with certain Velun energy patterns, the cells grew stronger instead of breaking down. It was not supposed to happen. Velun and human biology were completely different. Yet the two seemed to create balance when joined carefully. She realized that human adaptability was a kind of living miracle. It could heal and transform anything it touched. Late one night, she sat alone, studying the results. The data shimmered on the screen, and she whispered to herself, "Maybe this is the key." Her thoughts went to her past, to the pain of being called barren. For so long, she had believed that her body was broken. Now, as she looked at the living cells that grew stronger together, she wondered if her flaw could be healed too. She felt hope for the first time. Mason noticed her long hours and asked one evening, "You have been working without rest. What are you searching for?" Rena hesitated before answering. "A way to create life where it was thought impossible." Mason looked surprised but not doubtful. "If anyone can find it, it will be you." His faith made her heart feel light. She nodded and returned to her work with new determination. Her experiments soon caught the attention of the Human Medical Division. Scientists across the fleet began sending her data and requests. Rena shared her findings freely, teaching them how Velun energy could stabilize damaged DNA. Hundreds of injured workers and soldiers recovered faster thanks to her research. Messages of thanks poured in from every corner of human space. Rena read them all quietly. Each one filled her with warmth she could not describe. One day, while testing a new formula, Rena felt dizzy. She tried to focus, but her vision blurred. Mason, who had come to check on her, caught her before she fell. "You need to rest," he said firmly. She tried to argue, but his tone left no room. He guided her to her room and said, "You push yourself too hard." Rena looked at him with tired eyes. "I must finish this. I feel close to something important." Mason replied gently, "Whatever it is, it can wait a few hours. You matter more than your work." Those words touched her deeply. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. As she rested, her mind drifted to her old life. She remembered the cold halls of Velun, the sharp voices that called her a failure, and the day she was given away like a gift without value. That memory used to fill her with shame, but now she felt no pain. Her time among humans had changed her completely. They had shown her that value did not come from bloodlines or perfection. It came from what one chose to do with their life. When she returned to the lab, she was ready to take the next step. She combined human regenerative genes with a rare Velun energy crystal that could influence cell structure. The reaction was unstable at first, but she adjusted it carefully. After hours of fine work, the energy settled into a perfect balance. The cells began to divide and glow softly on the screen. Rena watched in silence as they formed complex patterns. She realized she had just created the first living hybrid cell between human and Velun. Her heart beat faster. She knew this was more than science. This was a path to something greater. She called Mason to show him. When he arrived, she explained, "This proves that life can exist between our kinds. Not only survive, but grow stronger." Mason studied the display, his eyes wide with wonder. "This changes everything," he said. Rena nodded slowly. "It changes me too." As days passed, she continued to refine the process. The hybrid cells grew rapidly, forming tissue and energy structures that could adapt to any condition. Her discovery spread across both human and Velun scientists who were in contact through the Alliance. Some Velun researchers dismissed it as impossible, others called it dangerous. But Rena did not stop. She believed that life itself was meant to find new ways, not stay locked in the limits of the past. Mason supported her through every step. When the council sent warnings to slow her work, he stood beside her. "You are not alone in this," he said. She looked at him with gratitude. "Why do you trust me so easily?" He answered, "Because everything you do comes from hope, not pride." That answer stayed in her heart like a light that would never fade. Months later, an accident struck a nearby mining colony. A radiation leak threatened hundreds of workers, and their medics could not stop the damage. Rena and Mason rushed to help. She brought her new hybrid cells to test in real life. When she applied them to the injured, the cells began to repair their damaged organs faster than any known treatment. Within hours, lives that were thought lost were saved. The colony sent messages of thanks and called her the Star Healer. She accepted their gratitude quietly, but inside she felt something stronger than pride. She felt peace. That night, as the horizon sailed through the dark, Rena stood at the observation deck with Mason. The stars shimmered across the glass. She said softly, "I never believed I would see life grow through my hands." Mason replied, "You gave more than life. You gave hope." She turned to him and smiled gently. "Hope is what your kind gave me first." He looked at her with warmth in his eyes. Neither spoke for a while. They just stood there, watching the stars move slowly past. In the following weeks, Rena noticed her body felt different. She had more energy, but also strange sensations she could not explain. She went to the medical bay for a scan. The results made her stop in disbelief. The doctor looked at her and said carefully, "Princess, your readings show signs of new cell growth within you. It looks like early stages of creation." Rena froze. Her mind could not believe what she was hearing. She, the Barren princess, was carrying life. When Mason came to see her, she told him everything. His eyes widened, then softened. "This is a miracle," he said quietly. Rena shook her head slowly. "It is science and love together. It is the proof that what they called impossible can be real." Mason took her hands and said, "Then we will face whatever comes together." She felt a deep calm settle inside her. The fear that once ruled her heart vanished completely. As the days went on, Rena's condition remained stable. The hybrid cells she had created were now part of her, and the new life growing within her. She kept the news private, not yet ready to face what others might think. But every time she placed her hand on her stomach, she felt a quiet joy. It was as if the universe itself had given her a second chance. Her research continued in secret, focused now on understanding how two different species could create something entirely new. She realized that this child, if born, would be the first true bridge between human and Velun. Not just a symbol, but living proof that unity could give birth to life. She began recording her discoveries for the future, knowing that one day both worlds would need this knowledge. Mason stayed by her side every step of the way. He brought her food when she forgot to eat, made her laugh when she grew tired, and reminded her that she was not alone. Together they built a quiet bond that went beyond friendship. It was not spoken, but it was felt deeply by both. One evening, Rena stood at the window watching the stars. Her reflection showed a calm, strong woman who no longer carried the weight of shame. She touched the glass and whispered, "I was given away as a joke, but I have found meaning." Behind her, Mason said softly, "You were never a joke. You were a gift." She turned to him with a gentle smile. For the first time in her life, she truly believed those words. As the horizon continued its journey through the galaxy, Rena felt the small spark of life growing inside her. The Barren princess was no longer barren. She had become the mother of a new beginning, a bridge of hope between two distant worlds. Rena stood on the observation deck of the horizon, her hands resting lightly on the railing. Below, the stars stretched endlessly, a river of light across the darkness. Beside her, Mason watched quietly. They had traveled far beyond known space, discovering new worlds and new possibilities. Yet now, their journey brought them to a challenge Rena had never anticipated. It was time to return to Velun. Her mind was calm, but her heart carried a quiet determination. She was no longer the princess who had been mocked for her barrenness. She carried life inside her, the child of hope and courage, a symbol of something greater than herself. She had learned the human way, the strength of compassion, the power of care, and the courage to act even when all odds seemed against her. Now she would face her people not as a failure, but as proof that life could triumph over judgment. When the horizon entered Velun orbit, the Empire's crystal towers reflected the pale sun. The city below was as cold and sharp as she remembered. The nobles, the council, and her father waited, their eyes full of curiosity, suspicion, and unspoken doubt. Many whispered among themselves, questioning why the princess had returned at all. Some said she was weak. Others feared she had discovered something that could shame them. Rena descended from the ship in the ceremonial shuttle. Her body glowed faintly with the energy that sustained her child, but she walked with quiet grace as if nothing could shake her confidence. Mason stood by her side, his presence a reminder of the world that had taught her strength through kindness. The guard stepped aside, surprised at the calm authority she now carried. The council chamber was as imposing as ever, with high ceilings of living crystal and floors that reflected every movement. Velun nobles sat in perfect alignment, their eyes sharp and assessing. At the far end, Emperor Terran rose slowly, his expression unreadable. He had heard rumors of her transformation, of the miracles she had accomplished among humans, but he had not believed them. "Princess Rena," the Emperor said, his voice echoing in the chamber, "you have returned." Rena stepped forward, her child visible in her womb, a quiet pulse of life that no Velun could ignore. "Yes, father," she said clearly. "I have returned. I bring proof that life can thrive where it was once thought impossible." The chamber grew silent. Some nobles frowned. Others whispered urgently. The council had never seen a princess carry life after being called barren. They had expected her to fail. Now she stood before them, radiant with quiet power. Rena held her head high and began to speak. "I was given away as a gift of mockery, sent to a human who was told I could never produce life. I have learned much in their world. I have learned that strength is not in perfection alone. Strength is in courage. Strength is in compassion. Strength is in the will to protect life." Her voice echoed with quiet authority. The nobles shifted uneasily. Some could not comprehend her words. Others felt a stir of awe. "My child grows within me," she continued, placing a hand lightly on her abdomen. "A life born not from perfection but from love and courage. This child is the first bridge between our people and humans. It is proof that unity and understanding are stronger than pride and fear. The Emperor's face remained stoic, yet his eyes revealed a flicker of emotion he had not felt in decades. He had believed in perfection above all else. He had believed that flaws were weakness. But now, standing before his daughter, he was forced to reconsider everything he had taught the Empire. One of the counselors spoke cautiously. "Princess, this child, it is an abomination." "Villain purity." Rena turned to him, her gaze steady. "It is not abomination, it is life. It is proof that judgment alone does not define value. On Earth, humans cherish what we would call flaw. They have taught me that care and courage create strength beyond what any perfection can achieve." Another counselor, older and wiser, leaned forward. "If what you say is true, Princess, this is a moment unlike any before. But your people, our people, may resist change. They may see this as threat to tradition." Rena nodded. "Perhaps, but a new path must begin somewhere. If not now, then when? If not with me, then with whom? I was once considered worthless. Now I bring life and hope. That is not weakness. That is the future." The chamber was still. Even the skeptics could not deny the quiet authority she carried. Her words did not shout. They did not demand. They simply existed as truth, undeniable and strong. Mason stepped forward, standing beside her. "Emperor Terran," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I am a human. I have traveled many worlds and faced many dangers. I have seen courage in every form, in every race. Princess Rena's courage is real. She does not need your approval. She only needs your understanding. What she carries is proof that life is stronger than judgment." The Emperor's gaze shifted between the human commander and his daughter. The council murmured in surprise. They had never seen humans speak with such quiet authority. They had never seen a Velun princess return with courage and life in her hands. Rena took a deep breath. "I will not ask for your praise. I only ask that you see what is possible. The world we know is not limited by old rules. Life can be created where it was once impossible. Unity can be built where division once ruled. That is my gift to you, to our people, and to the universe." A long silence followed. The chamber, filled with cold, hard eyes, slowly began to shift. Some counselors lowered their heads in quiet acknowledgement. Others looked at the floor, unsure how to respond. And yet a small spark of hope began to grow among them. Finally, Emperor Terran spoke. "Princess Rena, you have returned not as the child I once thought weak, but as a mother, a bridge, and a teacher. I do not fully understand your path, yet I see that it is strong. Velen must change, and perhaps it begins with you." Rena bowed slightly, her heart steady. She did not feel the need for his praise, but hearing the acknowledgement was not unwelcome. "Thank you, Father. That is all I ask, that we see the future and walk toward it together." The council, seeing the Emperor's acceptance, gradually lowered their defenses. Some approached her to study the child within, to learn how life had been created where it was impossible before. Others stayed back, hesitant but curious. Rena met every gaze with calm confidence. She was no longer the princess who had been mocked. She was a mother, a scientist, a bridge between worlds, and a symbol of what courage and care could achieve. After the council session ended, Rena walked through the halls of Valen's palace, the once familiar paths now feeling different. She noticed the silence that had once weighed heavily upon her now felt like empty space waiting to be filled. She touched the walls and thought of all the times she had been told she was nothing. Now she was everything that mattered. Mason followed her quietly. "You did more than return," he said softly. "You changed the course of a people." Rena smiled faintly. "I only returned with what I had learned. The change was always possible. I just gave it form." In the following weeks, Velun began to adjust. The council started to discuss cooperation with humans on new projects. Scientists who had once scoffed at her work now sought her guidance. Children in the Empire learned of her courage and resilience. For the first time, weakness was not something to hide. It was a challenge to overcome. Rena spent her days working with humans and Valens together, teaching them how life could grow in unexpected ways. She demonstrated the hybrid cells she had created, showing how humans and Valuns could coexist and thrive. The knowledge spread slowly, but it took root. It was a seed of hope planted in hearts that had long been frozen by tradition. At night she would sit quietly, feeling the life within her grow stronger. She often thought of the horizon, the ship that had carried her across the stars and the humans who had taught her the meaning of courage and compassion, and she would smile. knowing that the journey that began as Mockery had become a legacy that would endure across generations. The Barren princess of Valoon had returned not as a symbol of shame, but as a mother, a teacher, and a bridge between worlds. She had faced the judgment of her people and transformed it. She had taken what was once weakness and turned it into hope. She had given life to the impossible and proved that the universe was not limited by fear or tradition. Rina's story was only beginning. Her child would grow to carry the legacy of two worlds, and through that legacy the power of courage, care, and unity would spread across galaxies. Years had passed since Rina returned to Valoon. The princess who had once been mocked as barren had become something greater than anyone could have imagined. She was no longer defined by her inability to give life. She had become a mother, a teacher, a symbol of hope, and a bridge between two very different worlds. Her child, Lior, now a young boy with both Valoon grace and human warmth in his eyes, played under the twin suns of Valoon, unaware of the monumental role he would one day carry. Rina often walked among the crystal towers of Valoon, watching the people she once feared. She saw change everywhere. Humans and Valoons now worked side by side on new projects, building colonies, repairing old worlds, and creating innovations that combined both species' strengths. Valoons who had once been cold and unfeeling now smiled more freely. They debated ideas openly and celebrated the small joys of life. The empire that had once judged her for her barrenness was now learning the lessons she had brought back with her. Mason remained by her side, a quiet presence of support and love. Though their bond had grown slowly, it was deep and unshakable. Together, they guided Lior's education, teaching him both the discipline of Valen science and the creative curiosity of humans. Rina found joy in watching him learn, seeing in his laughter a reflection of the life she had once thought impossible. One morning, Rina took Lior to the Hall of Stars, the same place where she had been given away years ago. The hall gleamed with the same cold beauty, but the air felt different now. Humans and Valens walked side by side, sharing ideas and experiments. Children ran freely under the watchful eyes of their teachers. The sound of laughter and discussion filled the room, replacing the silence that had once weighed so heavily on her. "Mother," Lior said, tugging gently at her hand, "tell me again about the day you returned." Rina smiled, brushing a lock of silver hair from her face. "I was scared, Lior, your people, my people. They had all expected me to fail. They thought I was nothing." She looked down at him, her eyes soft. "But I had hope, and I had courage, and I had friends who believed in me. That is how I came back. Not as someone broken, but as someone who could give life and change the world." Lior's eyes widened. "I want to be brave like you, Mother." "You are brave," Rina said firmly. "Bravery is not the absence of fear. It is acting even when you are afraid. You have the heart to do great things, Lior. Remember that always." The days that followed were filled with work and learning. Rina continued her research, expanding the hybrid science that had first brought life to Lior. Now, she worked to help entire colonies, combining human adaptability with Valen technology to create new systems of energy, medicine, and environmental control. Valens, who had once dismissed her as weak, now sought her guidance. Humans admired her intelligence and courage, and through all of it she maintained the quiet humility she had learned from her time among them. The empire itself was changing. The council had begun to accept that perfection was not the highest goal. Life, courage, and compassion were now considered the true measures of value. Children were encouraged to explore both human and Valoon methods of learning. The once rigid education system opened to creativity. Rina had not only returned as a mother, she had returned as a leader, reshaping the very foundations of her people. One evening, she stood on a balcony overlooking the city. Mason joined her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Look at what you've built," he said softly. The city glowed with golden light, and the hum of life filled the streets. Rina nodded, her eyes following a group of children running across a courtyard. "It is not just me," she replied. "It is everyone who believed in hope, who chose to act with courage. Life does that. It spreads slowly, but it reaches everywhere." Mason smiled. "And you showed them the way." Rina's gaze softened. "I only returned to show them what was possible. The rest is their choice. And they chose well." Her thoughts turned to Lior. The child had become a symbol too. Other children of mixed heritage were now welcomed in schools and homes across Valoon. They were no longer seen as mistakes or outsiders. They were proof that unity, courage, and love could create something stronger than fear. Rena often watched Lior play with human and Valen children alike, their laughter ringing across the crystal towers. It reminded her of the horizon, the ship where she had first learned to care, to hope and to dream. One day the council called for a special ceremony to honor Rena and the changes she had brought to Valen. She stood before the gathered nobles, humans and citizens of the empire. Lior held her hand, looking up at her with trust and love. "Princess Rena," a counselor said, "your return has shown us the impossible. You have brought life where we thought it could not exist. You have united our people with humans. You have taught us courage, compassion, and hope. For this we honor you." Rena bowed, her heart steady. "I did not act for honor. I acted because life matters. Courage matters. Love matters. That is all any of us need to do to change the world." The chamber erupted in applause. It was not forced or polite. It was real. People clapped because they understood, because they felt inspired, because they had seen proof that change was possible. Rena looked at Mason and then at Lior. She had returned as a mother, but she had also returned as a teacher and guide for generations to come. In the following years, Rena continued her work. She traveled between colonies, humans, and Valens, working together under her guidance. Lior grew, learning the lessons of courage and kindness from both his mother and the humans who had taught her. He learned to respect both worlds and to carry their legacy forward. The horizon, the ship that had been her home among humans, became a symbol of exploration, courage, and unity. Rena often visited it, teaching young students the value of understanding and bravery. She told them stories of her own journey, of the day she was given away as a mockery, and of the day she returned with life in her hands, and always. She reminded them of the same lesson she had learned from humans long ago. Strength is not perfection. Strength is care, courage, and hope. Strength is acting to protect life no matter the cost. The empire of Velun changed forever. Its people learned that flaws were not weaknesses, that cooperation could bring prosperity, and that life, in all forms, deserved respect. Humans and Valens built colonies together, explored new worlds, and faced dangers side by side. They celebrated their differences as strengths, and every day they taught the next generation to do the same. Rena stood once more on a balcony overlooking the city. Lior ran ahead, laughing as he played with children of both species. Mason stood behind her, quiet but steady, watching with pride. Rena placed her hand on her heart, feeling the pulse of life and hope around her. The girl who had been mocked, the princess who had been called Barren, had returned not only as a mother but as a bridge between worlds. The stars above Velun shone bright, mirrored by the lights of the city below. They reflected a universe that was no longer limited by fear or judgment. Rena smiled softly. She had learned the truth that humans had taught her all those years ago. Life is not measured by perfection. Life is measured by courage, love, and hope, and with that, the Barren princess of Velun, now a mother and a leader, watched her child run forward into the future, knowing that both of their worlds would grow stronger for generations to come. The galaxy was wide and full of unknowns, but Rena no longer feared it. She had learned to act with courage, to care with strength, and to embrace the impossible. Her legacy was living, breathing proof that even in a universe ruled by judgment and fear, hope could bloom and change everything. The end.